The sound of shattering glass ripped through the quiet afternoon like a gunshot. I froze halfway down the stairs, my heart skipping a beat as the echo rattled through the walls. That wasn't an accident. It was deliberate, violent. I sprinted outside, my pulse pounding in time with my footsteps, and stopped cold in my driveway. My brand new red Camaro, barely a week old, gleamed under the sun except where it didn't. The windshield was cracked like a spiderweb. The hood dented and scarred, as if someone had gone to war with it. Standing there, gripping a hammer, was Nancy Walton. She wasn't just any neighbor, she was the self-appointed queen of our HOA. Early 40s. Thick blonde hair twisted into a messy bun. A floral blouse rolled up to her elbows like she'd come ready for battle. Her face was flushed, trembling, not from guilt but from the adrenaline of someone convinced they were right. The hammer hung loosely at her side, its metal head catching the light. For a moment we just stared at each other. Then she smirked. "Maybe next time you'll read the HOA handbook before buying a clown car." My pulse was a drumbeat in my ears. I forced myself to breathe, took a step forward and said, "You smashed my car." "Nancy." The words sounded absurd out loud, like saying them might make them make sense. She shrugged, wiping sweat from her forehead. "It's against the community palette. Section 9, paragraph 2, no non-neutral colors. You've been warned twice." Warned. She meant those passive-aggressive notes she kept leaving on my door. I'd ignored them, thinking she'd move on to someone else. But apparently this was her idea of escalation. "You're out of your mind," I said, pulling my phone from my pocket. Her face changed when she realized I was recording. "Put that away," she snapped. "Watch me," I said. The camera captured everything. The glint of the hammer, the shattered hood, the splintered glass. Behind her, two neighbors peeked from behind their curtains, whispering. The only sound in the air was the soft wind and the groan of the old oak trees lining the street. Nancy pointed at me. "You think this will scare me? You've been parking that thing out here for days. It's an eyesore. It ruins the neighborhood's look." "It's my driveway," I said quietly. "And that's my car." "Not anymore, honey," she sneered. "It's evidence of an HOA violation." She lifted the hammer again, maybe just to prove she could. I stepped forward, my voice sharper now. "Don't even think about it." Then in the distance a siren wailed. Someone, thankfully, had called the police. Nancy froze, glancing around like she'd only just realized how public this had become. Her grip on the hammer loosened. "You threatened me?" she stammered suddenly. "You came at me yelling." I defended myself, a bitter laugh escaped me. "Defended yourself with a hammer? Against a parked car?" Before she could answer, a police cruiser rolled up, lights spinning silently in the sunlight. A calm, uniformed officer stepped out, mid-30s, steady voice, sharp eyes. He took one look at my car, then at the hammer in her hand. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "can you put the tool down?" "It's not a tool," she stammered. Well, I was doing HOA enforcement." The officer blinked, unimpressed. "Enforcement with a hammer?" Nancy looked like she wanted the ground to swallow her. "He's lying. He threatened me first." I held out my phone. "Everything's on video." The officer watched for less than 30 seconds before turning back to her. "Mrs. Walton, this is felony vandalism. Step back, please." Her false confidence cracked instantly. "You don't understand," she said, her voice trembling. "This car violates the HOA rules." "The HOA," the officer interrupted, "doesn't give you authority to destroy property. You'll need to come with us for questioning." Her shoulders slumped. The hammer clattered to the pavement. She glanced at me, eyes wide, not with guilt, but with fear. The kind of fear that comes when someone who always got their way finally doesn't. "Are you pressing charges?" the officer asked. "Yes," I said firmly. My voice didn't even shake, he nodded. "We'll file a full report. Bring proof of ownership and repair estimates." I looked at the Camaro, its hood beaten, its windshield shattered like a broken promise. My dream car gone in a minute of her madness. The smell of hot metal and oil hung in the air, mixed with the faint scent of Nancy's expensive perfume. As the officer led her toward the patrol car, she hissed under her breath, "You'll regret this. The HOA won't let this slide. You're finished here." "Guess we'll see," I said, slipping my phone back into my pocket. She looked like she wanted to lunge at me again, but the officer's hand on her shoulder stopped her. The neighborhood watched from behind curtains, silent witnesses to the fall of their so-called queen. The officer handed me a card. "File this with your insurance. We'll take her statement tonight." Thanks, I said quietly. He nodded and drove off, Nancy's muffled shouting fading behind the glass. The street grew still again. A bird called in the distance, its song cutting through the silence. I stared at the wreck, my reflection split across the fractured windshield. That car wasn't just a vehicle. It was years of work, sacrifice, and late nights. And she destroyed it over a rule she made up. I picked up the hammer she dropped, feeling its weight still warm from the sun. The absurdity of it all almost made me laugh. A grown woman smashing a car to feel powerful. Behind me, my neighbor, Mr. Henson, stepped outside. "You all right, Mark?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, just processing." He looked at the Camaro and shook his head. "She finally crossed the line." "Yeah," I said. "And this time she's not walking away." He gave a sympathetic nod and went back inside. The street felt exposed, raw. I could almost sense every house watching, waiting to see what I'd do next. I ran my hand across the Camaro's jagged hood. The red paint had been torn open, sharp enough to cut skin. Beneath it, the silver metal glimmered like a wound. Nancy's voice still echoed in my mind, smug, self-righteous. But now it sounded hollow. This time she couldn't hide behind the HOA. The truth was on video. As the sun dipped low and the sky turned gold, I replayed the footage. Every frame was clear, her swinging, shouting, laughing. Evidence she couldn't erase. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and looked at the wreck one last time. For the first time that day, I felt calm, because now I had proof, and more importantly, I had a plan. For the first time all day, I felt calm, because now I had proof. And more importantly, I had a plan. The neighborhood didn't know it yet, but Nancy's little empire was about to crumble, one hammer swing at a time. The next morning, the street felt quieter than usual, like everyone was pretending yesterday hadn't happened, but they had all seen it. Nancy with a hammer, the flashing police lights, the cruiser pulling away. The story had spread faster than wildfire. Still no one said a word. Around here, silence was the safest way to survive the HOA. I stood in my driveway, coffee in hand, staring at the wreck in daylight. My Camaro looked worse now that the adrenaline had worn off. Every dent, every crack in the windshield felt personal. I'd worked 15 years for that car. It wasn't just metal. It was a promise I'd made to myself when life was rough and money barely covered rent. Now that promise sat there broken, all because one woman believed her community rules mattered more than basic decency. By noon, my insurance agent arrived, a short, sharp-eyed man named Miller. He took one look and let out a low whistle. "Someone really went to town on this thing," he muttered, tracing a finger along the shattered glass. "HOA Vice President," I said flatly. Apparently my car didn't fit the neighborhood. Miller blinked. "You're kidding." "Wish I was." He jotted down notes, shaking his head. "We'll get you covered, but she's liable for every cent. Press charges, file a civil claim. This isn't small claims nonsense. 10 grand at least." I nodded, already knowing what I had to do. As he left, Miller gave me a quiet warning. "Be careful. People like that don't go down easy." He was right. That evening, as the sun sank behind the perfect rows of suburban homes, a thick envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address, just the HOA letterhead. Inside was a violation notice accusing me of unauthorized parking and disturbing community harmony. Fines totaled $300. The date? That same morning. I stood on the porch reading it twice, anger simmering beneath my skin. Nancy wasn't backing down. She was using the HOA's power as a weapon. Then my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You should have let it go, Mark. Things get harder when you make enemies here." I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I knew exactly who it was. Over the next few days, the harassment escalated. More envelopes arrived, one claiming my mailbox was non-compliant, another saying my trash bins were visible from the street. Petty. Calculated. Each letter reeked of Nancy's perfume, like she'd personally handled it just to remind me who was pulling the strings. Neighbors started avoiding eye contact. Some whispered when I passed. Others offered forced smiles but said nothing. Everyone knew Nancy's reach. She controlled parking permits, garden approvals, even paint colors. Anyone who crossed her faced fines, rules, or public humiliation at the next HOA meeting. But fear had stopped working on me. I'd seen her lose control, and that image, her screaming in front of cops, was burned into my mind. I began collecting everything: emails, letters, photos. Installed security cameras covering the street and my driveway. Kept a log of every time she drove by. The turning point came one evening when my neighbor Alan knocked on my door. He glanced around before speaking. "I heard what she did to your car," he said quietly. "She's been like this for years. You're not the first." "Then why hasn't anyone stopped her?" I asked. He sighed. "People are scared. She's connected. Her sister's on the board. Her cousin's the treasurer. It's all family. You file a complaint, it disappears." I felt something cold settle in my chest. "You have proof of that?" Alan nodded toward the folder under his arm. "Screenshots, emails, HOA chat logs. She brags about it. Said you deserved it for showing off your car." I flipped through the pages. There it was, her words in black and white. Mocking me, threatening others. "Why are you giving this to me?" I asked. Alan smiled faintly. "Because you're the first person she didn't scare off. Someone's got to finish this." The next morning I took everything to a local attorney named Angela Rivera. Her office smelled of coffee and printer toner, the air sharp with focus. She listened quietly as I laid out the story. The smashed car, the fake fines, the threats. When I finished, she leaned back, tapping her pen against the desk. "She's in deep trouble," Angela said. "This isn't just vandalism, it's abuse of power. With this evidence, we can file for damages, defamation, and HOA misconduct. $10,000 minimum." Her voice was calm, confident, the kind that only makes promises it can keep. "I want to do this right," I told her. "No drama, just the truth." Angela nodded. "That's the best revenge there is. The truth doesn't panic." By the end of the day, we'd filed the lawsuit. It would be served within 48 hours. That night, I saw Nancy for the first time since the police took her away. She stood beside her SUV, phone in hand, pretending to scroll, but watching me. When she realized I'd noticed, she gave a slow, mocking clap. "Cute move," she called. "Think a lawyer scares me?" "Not really," I said, "but a judge might." Her smile faltered. "You're wasting your money. The HOA will back me up. Then they can go down with you." The color drained slightly from her face before she recovered. "You'll regret this, Mark. You don't understand how things work here." I stepped closer, just enough for her to hear me clearly. "No, Nancy. You don't understand how accountability works." She turned away, muttering as she stomped back inside. Over the next few days, the tone of HOA emails changed. The confidence was gone, replaced by neutral language. Their newsletter no longer featured Nancy's name in the board spotlight. Word spread quietly. She was under investigation for misconduct. I didn't celebrate. I just documented everything and waited for the court summons. Then came the moment I knew the tide had turned. Mrs. Green, a neighbor who'd always avoided me, approached while I washed my car. "Good for you," she said softly. No one ever stood up to her before. I smiled faintly. Someone had to. Her eyes flicked toward Nancy's house. "You hit her where it hurts, the image. She's been panicking ever since." I believed it. At night, I'd see Nancy pacing on her porch, phone pressed to her ear, whispering furiously into the dark. It should have felt like victory, but instead, it felt like the calm before a storm. People like Nancy don't crumble quietly. They explode when cornered. The next morning, a police cruiser rolled slowly down the street. It paused briefly in front of her house, then continued on. Even from my porch, I could see her blinds twitching. The neighborhood was holding its breath again. Only this time, it wasn't me under scrutiny. It was her. That night, as the wind rustled through the trees and the repaired Camaro gleamed faintly under the porch light, I thought about what Angela had said. Truth doesn't panic. Nancy had built her power on fear and silence. But now, silence was gone. Every neighbor who'd suffered under her rules finally saw that she could be beaten, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling she wasn't finished. People like Nancy never go quietly. There was still one last storm coming. I could feel it, The papers were filed. The evidence was airtight. But as I watched her dark house across the street, I knew one thing for certain. She was plotting her next move. And this time, I was ready. A week after the lawsuit, the neighborhood changed. The once perfect calm of Willow Bend Lane felt charged with invisible tension, as if every white fence and trimmed hedge was holding its breath. Cars slowed when they passed my driveway. Eyes darted between my repaired Camaro and Nancy's house across the street. Her SUV, the same one she'd used to smash my car, sat parked crooked, bumper dented, paint scraped. It was as if her arrogance had started to rust right along with the metal. On the third morning, I woke to a sharp clang of metal. At first, I thought it was raccoons. Then it came again, rhythmic, deliberate. I pulled back the curtain and froze. Nancy was standing in my yard, clutching a garden rake like a weapon. She was stabbing at the soil near my mailbox, muttering under her breath. I stepped outside slowly. "Lose something?" She startled, then straightened, forcing composure. "You're violating HOA landscaping code," she snapped. "This mulch isn't regulation color." I looked at the dark red wood chips she'd been stabbing. "You're trespassing, Nancy." "This is community property," she said, though her voice wavered. "Not this part. Get off my lawn." Her eyes flicked toward my porch camera. The tiny red light blinked. For a moment, her fury cracked. Fear flashed across her face. Then, without another word, she dropped the rake and stormed back home, slamming the door. By noon, the HOA email chain exploded with messages about hostile homeowners, camera intimidation, and non-compliant yard maintenance. The tone was cold, official, and unmistakably hers. What Nancy didn't realize was that my attorney now had full access to those messages. Each one only tightened the noose she'd woven around herself. 2 days later, a letter arrived from the county clerk. A court date set for the following week. I scanned it twice, a surge of satisfaction spreading through me. It was finally happening. Public, undeniable accountability. But that night, the sound of scraping metal jolted me awake. I rushed outside barefoot, heart pounding. The Camaro was gone. Only tire tracks glistened under the streetlight leading downhill toward the cul-de-sac. I sprinted after them, the cold air biting my skin. Halfway down the block, hazard lights flickered. My car sat crumpled against a mailbox, rear bumper crushed. The driver's door hung open. I called the police immediately. When the officers arrived, their flashlights cut through the dark. One crouched beside the door. "No forced entry," he said. "You sure it was locked?" "I'm sure," I replied. "Last thing I did before bed." He nodded slowly. "Then someone had a key, or found another way in. Anyone who'd want to mess with you?" I didn't answer. My eyes drifted toward her house. The blinds were closed, but behind them, a faint shadow shifted. The next morning, I sent my camera footage to Angela. It showed a hooded figure approaching the car after midnight. The porch light caught just enough of her face. "That's her," Angela said when she called. "Breaking and entering, property damage, violation of restraining terms. This just became criminal." That evening, police arrived again, this time with a warrant. They searched Nancy's garage and found a box of tools, a crowbar, and a spare Camaro key fob with my initials scratched into it. Nancy screamed as they let her out. "This is harassment. He planted that. You can't prove anything." Neighbors gathered quietly on the sidewalks. For years, she'd humiliated people, fined them, mocked them, ruled over them. Now she was the one being escorted into a squad car, her voice fading under the engine's hum. That should have been the end of it, but power like hers doesn't vanish overnight. 2 days later, I got an email from an unfamiliar address. Subject: "You've made a mistake." The message read, "You think this ends in court? You don't know who you're dealing with." Attached was a photo of my Camaro taken from across the street, time-stamped that same morning. I forwarded it straight to Angela. "Keep documenting," she said. "She's desperate now. Don't engage. The more she acts out, the stronger your case." I tried, but unease crept into everything. Each night I double-checked the locks. Every car door outside made me tense. Even neighbors who once supported me now kept their distance, afraid of getting caught in the crossfire. Then one evening, just before sunset, a tow truck appeared at the end of the street, bright yellow, loud, impossible to miss. The driver climbed down, checking his clipboard. "Mark Davis?" he asked. "That's me. Got a work order to remove a silver Camaro from this address." "There's no such order," I said sharply. "Who sent it?" He frowned, flipping through pages. "Signed by the HOA, same board that approved last month's removals." Even from a holding cell, she was still trying to pull strings. I showed him the police report, restraining order, and lawsuit documents. His expression shifted. "Say no more," he muttered. "I'm out of here." As the truck pulled away, I noticed movement across the street. Cheryl, Nancy's sister, stood on the porch, arms folded, phone in hand, wearing the same smug grin. The board hadn't removed her. They just replaced one bully with another. That night I sat at my desk staring at the glow of my computer screen. They weren't going to stop. They'd twist every rule and loophole to make me pay for standing up to them, but they'd underestimated me before. I opened a new email, attaching every document, photo, and video I had. Alan's evidence, the chat logs, the vandalism footage, even Cheryl's recent messages. No commentary, no accusations, just the truth. Then I hit send to the entire neighborhood mailing list. Within minutes, replies poured in: shock, outrage, support. People who had stayed silent for years finally found their voices. Some admitted to being unfairly fined. Others shared how Nancy's threats had driven them away. It was like a dam had broken. By midnight, a message from Alan arrived. "You did it. The board's collapsing. People are demanding a full re-election." The next morning, the HOA banner was gone from Nancy's porch. Her sister's SUV sat abandoned, a flat tire sagging in the sun. The community chat was full of new volunteers promising fairness and transparency. For the first time in months, the street felt quiet in a different way. Lighter. Freer. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling it wasn't over. People like Nancy don't disappear. They regroup. Somewhere behind a lawyer's desk or at a new address. She was probably already plotting her return. But as I stood beside my repaired Camaro, sunlight glinting off the hood, I realized something important. I wasn't afraid anymore. She'd shown me what real power looks like. It isn't fear or control. It's resilience. The neighborhood had changed forever, and so had I. And though I knew this wasn't the last I'd hear of Nancy or her kind this time, the whole street was watching.